Hurt people hurt, but healed people also heal. That is going to be the topic of this episode of Chi Life. Hi everyone, so I'm just back from another festival that I was attending and doing some stuff at over the weekend. And as usual at these festivals, there's all sorts of interesting things happening and all sorts of interesting conversations being had, and lots of things going on, and sometimes out of these interactions and activities and conversations, there's some useful insights to be had. And there's one thing in particular at that festival that I was just at that cropped up a few different times in different places in some of the presentations that people were making and the things they were talking about, that I thought it would be worth to talk about a little bit myself and put a little bit of a different spin on. One of the things that I noticed being mentioned a number of times, several times in different presentations people were doing, was they used the phrase, it's a bit of a saying and you might have heard it before, hurt people hurt. And it's this idea that when people go and hurt other people, create harm in some way, it's often because they themselves have been hurt at some time in the past. They've been through some trauma and so on, and they go on to perpetuate this, onto other people. And I think there's value in that saying. It does help to understand a little bit, just a little step below the surface of what's sometimes going on and different interactions that we have with people and different things we see happening in the world, to be able to understand that the reason why quite often someone is doing something harmful, something hurtful, is because they themselves have been hurt in the past and they haven't figured out how to break out of that and change those patterns. So I think that is a useful saying. I would like to put out there another saying that I think it would be really useful to popularize. Probably not everyone's heard of hurt people hurt, but it's probably not unfamiliar to a lot of people who have paid attention to or worked in the area of health, and particularly relating to psychology and so on, to understand this dynamic that goes on. But I think it would be useful to also put some focus onto another saying, which I'm actually not sure. I may have coined this myself. I'm not sure I've heard anyone else say it, but it's logically true if you think about it, and I think there's real value in it. And that is that healed people heal. And I think that's a useful thing for us to put some focus on. Because there's another principle in working with our mind, working with our energy, that where we put our focus, where we put our attention, that's where we tend to send our energy. And so what we put our focus and attention on, that thing tends to grow. So if we're putting our focus on that hurt people hurt, and we're recognizing this thing, this pattern, that can give us understanding that's a good thing. But if we put too much focus on that, it can lead to us actually, in a way, perpetuating that cycle ourselves, or going like, yeah, this is just a thing that happens, hurt people hurt, and they get into these vicious cycles. On the flip side of that, if we put our attention onto the other side of that, and because these really are two sides of the same coin, they very much the same principle. If we put our focus on that healed people heal, maybe that puts us in a position where we're more likely to grow that and perpetuate that cycle. Now again, I don't think there's anything wrong with the saying hurt people hurt, but I think it's a useful way to sum up some pretty important understanding of some of the patterns we see. But I think it's also really useful to not always just look at and talk about that side of the coin, but to have an equally easy saying that we can have and have front of our mind, that healed people heal. so that we can put our attention to that as well and grow that. Whether that be within ourselves, whether that be in our interactions with other people around us, to recognize the potential that if someone, yeah, maybe they've been hurt, maybe they're perpetuating further hurt, but if that person can become healed, that will also often have ripple effects outwards. In the same way that someone being hurt has ripple effects outwards and can lead to more hurt, when someone is healed, those ripples can extend outward and they can go on, and their influence, whether it's consciously aiming to, consciously go and heal other people, but simply by them being healed, that will change their interaction with other people and with the world around them, and lead to other people being healed in sometimes small ways, sometimes quite profound ways, and leads to a virtuous cycle of good creating more good, creating more good. And I think it's really worth putting attention onto that, having a simple saying that we can bring to mind to recognize, hey, out there in the world, it's not all vicious cycles. There are virtuous cycles as well, and we can choose to focus on those virtuous cycles to make them stronger. I actually, this is not the first time I came up with this phrase, and again, maybe it's highly likely someone else has said it at some point. I don't recall seeing or hearing anyone else say it before. I think the first time I actually just said it was in conversation with someone who's actually a medical practitioner, and involved in some deep thinking and approaching things in a somewhat different way maybe than your standard medical practitioner does, and he was talking about how he was feeling a bit depressed and sad and gloomy about the world and all the stuff going on, and how these cycles perpetuate themselves and so on, and in that conversation I, hey, yeah, that's a pattern that we see, but the flip side is also true. It's not just that hurt people hurt, healed people also healed. And he actually told me, and I could see it in the moment, he said, look, that's actually bringing tears to my eyes, because it helped him to shift the way he was thinking about some things and recognize that, even with all these harmful cycles and things going on, we can turn that around. We can have hope. We can have hope for changing things out of a vicious cycle towards a virtuous one. It doesn't mean it's going to happen all of a sudden or at all at once, but we can have hope in the creation of virtuous cycles, not just vicious ones. And so it certainly had an impact on that person, which I was like, wow, that's kind of cool that had such a positive effect on him. And, listening to the conversation, some of the presentations and things, like, yeah, they were talking about good principles, and actually within some of the things that they said, they did talk about the principle actually sometimes of that once someone is healed, they go on to have positive effects on the people around them. So they were talking about this idea of healed people being healed, but they didn't have a nice little saying to encapsulate it. And sometimes these little sayings can help us to keep this in our mind, can help that to be something that we focus on more easily, and then let that have an effect both within our own lives and let that effect ripple out to other people as well. At these festivals, it's interesting, you get a real mix of people. Some people who are there just to have fun and that sort of thing. So the festival I was at, it's one where there's no alcohol and drugs and this sort of thing, and so you also get and people who are interested in alternative lifestyles and natural healing and spirituality and all these sorts of things. So it's that kind of a festival. If you're interested in which festival exactly, so it was NZ Spirit. I might put a link to the website below. It's an interesting festival if you're already in New Zealand or happen to be coming this way, might be something you're interested in. And there's other festivals like that happen here as well. So yeah, you get people who come, just wanting to have fun, have a good time, but because of this focus where it's like no alcohol, no drugs, natural healing, all that sort of thing, you also get people who come who it's actually coming to the festivals is quite a big thing for them in terms of a shift in their lifestyle, changing some of those patterns that they may have had where they were hurting themselves and maybe other people through their lifestyle, through the things they were doing, through using different substances, through unhealthy habits and patterns. And attending these festivals is how they start to enter into new habits and patterns, hopefully that they carry on not just inside the festival, but into other parts of their lives as well, where they take up practices like well, like Qigong, maybe, but other ones as well, like yoga and breath work and all these things that can actually help them to create positive change in their lives. And for some of these people who've been coming to these festivals for a while, some of them have, quite interesting stories about how really changing their lifestyle in this way really has healed them in many ways, and that has gone on to have positive effects in their life. So, we have these living examples of healed people then going on to heal others as well. So that was just a little thing that was on my mind after going to some of the presentations and things, and kind of like, yeah, teaching good stuff, good principles, but maybe we could also popularize this other saying that healed people heal. I think it's worthwhile. What we focus on, that is where our energy tends to go, and that is what tends to grow in our lives. So giving us that focus, we can all start to make some virtuous cycles in our own lives, which will then go out, ripple out to affect other people as well. There's lots of challenging stuff out there in the world, and there will be. Focusing on this one side of the coin, on healed people healing, doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge the other side of the coin, that we don't acknowledge the negative cycles that happen, and that we don't understand it, and we don't pay attention to that. But having more of a focus on the positive, you know, I think is a really helpful, valuable thing for us. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this vlog. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all those good things, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one soon.